Welcome into the second episode of the Inverted Microphone podcast. I'm Rees Goodall, joined here by Joa'o, Lara Jr. and Zach Dworaczyk. Joa'o, we'll start with you. How are you doing today, buddy?
Doing amazing. Happy to be here.
That's good. Zach, how about yourself?
It's a great day, man. Great day.
Nothing else?
Nope. It's just a great day.
Sounds good. Well, we've got a jam-packed show for you guys today, talking some Premier League transfers yet again, with the transfer window still ongoing and the Premier League season about a couple weeks away. Lots of teams making moves, lots of teams rumored to be making moves, and some very interesting rumors to talk about. We'll get it started with the Manchester United rumors. They're in desperate need of a striker because of Joshua Zirkzee and Rasmus Højlund being bad. If you can even describe them as strikers, that's a compliment to them. They're targeting two separate players. They're on two separate paths in their career right now. The first one is Benjamin Sesko from RB Leipzig. The second one is Aston Villa's Ollie Watkins. Joa'o, we'll start with RB Leipzig's Benjamin Sesko. It's much more of a project striker. Arsenal were rumored to go after him, but the price from Sesko's agent was proven to be too high. What are your thoughts on United targeting such a young striker?
Well, first of all, I just want to start off by saying that we've been absolutely bamboozled. I know last week we said, I said at least, United doesn't have money for a striker. United doesn't have the resources to bring in another top talent. I don't know where Sir Jim Ratcliffe is pulling out this money, to be quite honest. But I think that Benjamin Sesko it's risky, right? You're not getting someone who's prem proven. You're not getting someone who has necessarily. I think he's shown some of his worth at Leipzig. It's just, can you fit him in the project? Well, he fit Amorim's style, which is the biggest thing right now. And then it's another one of those transfers. Apparently, or not apparently, when we got Højlund, it was said to be that, oh, he's the next upcoming talent. He's done great at Atalanta. His upside is amazing, and it's so scary too. Because I was reading amounts right now, and they're in the upper 70s. So it's like you're shelling out 70 million on another striker, and it's you don't know if he's gonna work or not. At least the way you want it to.
I mean, going off of that, it's more of our old guard transfer approach. This year we've prioritized prem proven guys, whereas the older regime would target guys based off their potential. But me personally, I really love Shesko's potential, and I think he could really work out if we signed him. The price tag's a bit scary, and I worry that we might have to get some sales before it. I've heard there's a possible Højlund swap deal in the Shesko talks, but I love the idea of Sesko.
I mean, going back to the potential that he's shown, last two seasons in the Bundesliga, it was 13 goals and 33 appearances in 2024-25. The year before, 14 goals in 31 games. It is not a proven goal-scoring record per se compared to what the original target was in Viktor Gyökeres, but there is definitely the potential there. I mean, you see some of the goals he scores. They're against quality sides in the Bundesliga, but they are also quality goals. There's been some where he has hit the ball perfectly from 40 yards out, and it's why so many teams are raving after him. Newcastle's one of them in there. Arsenal was one earlier in the window before, as I mentioned earlier, they had disagreements with the price. Benjamin Sesko's agent was trying to drive it up. Andrea Berta, who is Arsenal's sporting director, pulled out of it and decided to go for Gyökeres just because the deal was easier to be made rather than what Sesko became. And I think it is unfortunate that Sesko wouldn't end up at Arsenal because I do think that his peak is going to be higher than what Gyökeres' peak will be. The issue is he's not there yet, and this kind of leads me into my next question, is the last two strikers that United have shelled out a large sum of money for have been project strikers, have been guys that aren't proven yet and need to prove themselves at a high level. And does it really make sense for United to go out and do the same thing with Sesko, a guy who is not proven yet, but again has the potential?
With that, I was thinking about this today, and I look back on United over the years because it's been disappointing, but there's been great moments. And I think initially what happened with Ollie Gunnar, I felt like that project should have gone on longer than it should have. I feel like that project was full of so much potential, and I feel like maybe you you grab a striker there at that time, and maybe he's developed, or maybe there's a system where there's not a striker. We see it a lot these days, but it's just, first of all, like before we start talking about project strikers or somebody for the now, I feel like United has to invest in this Amorim system. It has to be something that they give 3-4 years time. It's not going to be the prettiest, but once again, if Sesko really has that upside, there's going to be flashes and there's going to be moments, but the kid needs time. The kid needs time, and with Ollie Watkins, it's the age that concerns me a little bit. He's a little bit older. Price tags, they are similar, and I know I jumped the gun here, but it's just, he's prem proven. If you want results now, if we were a team who was sort of like Arsenal, who has had their time and trial and has really worked, then I'd say, oh yeah, let's go after Ollie Watkins. Let's go after somebody who's given results in the Prem. But we're not at that moment to say, oh, we need an Ollie Watkins. I think it's something you invest on. Now you bring in Prem proven talents around him, people who know the game. If Šeško's good at that, if he's good at picking it up, he'll learn it. He'll soak it in, and it'll take less time. But those are really my thoughts right now with United and really where I stand.
I agree with you in a sentiment, but I don't think Emery has that time. There's going to be so much pressure from fans, from the board, from top Reds, just on him to succeed immediately. And I think that's why they're targeting a guy like Ollie Watkins, or I'd love them to target a guy like Jean-Philippe Mateta, who we haven't been mentioned in. But overall, I like the potential with Sesko. I mean, that's all what it comes down to with him. And I think if you give him a few years, he could look really good in this Amorim system.
Going back to Ollie Watkins, though, I mean, his first 5 seasons in the Premier League, he's scored more than 10 goals in each of those seasons. Last season was 16 goals and 8 assists. The year before, he had 32 total goal contributions and 19 goals, 13 assists. And this is something that we've talked about a lot, both on and off the pod, is that Ollie Watkins is a guy who is at or right near his peak. He's a guy that, if you go out and buy him, you are going to have a quality striker for the next couple years. But again, you're going to have to look for something else new in the next couple seasons to really replace him. And it's just fascinating to see what direction United goes, whether it is the youth of Sesko, whether it is the more experienced option in Ollie Watkins. But going back to an earlier point made by Joa'o, he talked about how United was building something with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and before it came crashing down. The 2020-21 season, you guys finished second in the league. Yes, you finished second by some margin, but it was still a quality season. The year after was 6th place finish. That's when Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was sacked. But looking at the transfer window, it's over 120 million on Jadon Sancho, Rafael Varane, and Cristiano Ronaldo. All 3 moves, which, as you say, Varane's probably the best player from that 3, but none of them really panned out to the price tags. I know Ronaldo is technically only like 15 million, but still, bringing him in kind of signaled the end of that project to me.
Here's my thing with those transfers, at least, and with that era with and I can go down the list and say Van Gaal, Mourinho, Moyes, what was it, Ole Gunnar, and then I think it was right before Rangnick. This was an era where Manchester United was relying on Ed Woodward, someone who was not familiar with the game, someone who was not familiar with necessarily the ins and outs of football. He was a businessman brought on by the Glazers because there was someone that he knew. He worked in investment banking here in the United States, if I'm not wrong. He worked with a big firm, and it's just, that window is so tainted. That window is so, yes, you can look at, oh, United spent so much money on these players, and it's just there's a reason, and that reason is Ed Woodward. And it's just, if United had a proper sporting director, if they had a proper person there in time, where maybe there'd be more communication with the coaches, because I remember instances where there were many coaches at the time that, oh, I wanted this player, but they brought me somebody totally different. At that time, it was just splashing cash on who do we want. I feel like Varane, out of those 3, had the most potential. He he had great games and he was a great partnership with Licha, but it was just the injuries. It was the injuries that affected that. Obviously, we knew what happened with Ronaldo, and then Sancho. It's very disappointing, and I think there could have been so much more at the time, and especially with the 120 million.
And I agree in some sentiments with Joao. I don't love that transfer window. I consider Varane a success. He obviously didn't live up to his potential or what he could have been, but he won us 2 trophies. Granted, they're not the greatest of trophies, but he was consistent in a time where we lacked consistency. The other two, though, it's what United used to be. You know, it's what our old sporting directors have wanted, and it's just big names splashing cash, and that's just not a way to succeed in the Prem. It's just not.
Yeah, well, we'll switch gears now to Arsenal, who have been quite busy in this transfer window. They've also put pen to paper with Viktor Gyökeres finally sealing that deal. We talked about it last week and what it means for Arsenal, but it's just so good to finally see that announcement. It felt like that transfer saga dragged on for a long time, kind of similar to Embuemo for United. But bringing in Gyökeres is going to be just a leap for this Arsenal team. I mean, you look back at some of their games last season where they were either eliminated from the Champions League or dropped out of the title race, it was because they were not clinical. You look at mainly that Champions League second leg against PSG, Arsenal were all over PSG in that game. And the two holes that really cost them that fixture were defensively, Thomas Partey was not good in transition. They've addressed that need, replacing him with Martin Zubimendi, and they had a boatload of chances that they did not take care of. They did not utilize to their fullest, and that's why they brought in Viktor Gyökeres, and it is probably the best striker signing for its worth. I mean, only 60 million odd, and compared to some of the other Premier League signings this summer.
In these days, 60 million for someone who had as many contributions as Gyökeres did, I mean, that's absolutely amazing. Arsenal has done great business throughout the whole summer. My only concern is, I remember what was it? It was Darwin Núñez went to Liverpool that they hiked up the price. It was a pretty big fee. I remember statements coming after from Benfica sporting director saying, "Oh, we would have sold him for this price. We don't think he's that much." It's just, once again, I ask the question. I'll continue asking the question until match day 1. How will Gyökeres pan out in the Premier League? Is he built for the Premier League? Yes, we've seen great moments, but even then, what's the big difference between Liga Portugal and the Premier League? Because Premier League is considered the pinnacle of club sport, of club football. And Liga NOS has had good moments. It's just, is there too much hype on this train, or is it necessary?
And I agree with those sentiments. I mean, that's the big question was always going to be around Jock, no matter where he went. But I love the price. I was worried for so long that if United signed him, that the price was going to be like 80 mil or 90 mil, whatever Sporting wanted. And I was worried it was going to be some ridiculous fee. But I think it's great business by Arsenal getting him for such a small fee.
And looking at Darwin Núñez's last season with Benfica, in all competitions he scored 34 goals in 41 games rather. For Gyökeres last season, he scored 54 in 52 total games, including 6 goals and 8 Champions League appearances. I think if you're scoring that much, especially in the Champions League too, that is something that is just destined to transfer over to the Premier League. Yes, I'm obviously biased, but I do think when you're scoring at such a prolific rate, it's just too easy to just transition into the Prem. Some other Arsenal rumors that have come out, they're looking to bring in the left winger / number 10 from Crystal Palace, Eberechi Eze, which I think is going to be one of the better transfers of this window if they can get it over line, because this is the one that, alongside Gyökeres, these were Arsenal's 2 holes. I mean, you can really include Zubimendi in that list, as he filled the hole in the 6th position. But now Arsenal's attack is totally reworked if this deal gets over the line. There's questions about what the fee will be. He does have a release clause for, I believe it is £60 million. And right now there's discussions on how much will be paid up front, how much will be paid later. If this is a deal that can get over the line, it follows what Mikel Arteta loves to do in his transfers, which is bring in a guy who can play anywhere and everywhere. And it's not like Eze's a jack of all trades, master of none. He's really, really lethal in these attacking positions, whether it is centrally, on the right wing, on the left wing. I'd presume he's likely to play off the left due to just players that are on the left wing for Arsenal right now. They've got Gabriel Martinelli, they've got Leandro Trossard, who really are not at the level that Arsenal needs them to be, given where Arsenal is in the title race year after year. You look centrally, they've got Max Doman, who granted is 15 years old, but he's a nice prospect there. He looks like he's going to be one of the best prospects in the world. Ethan Nwaneri, he just turned 18. He's still in that list as well. And of course, the captain, Martin Odegaard. But bringing in a guy like Eze really, really does raise the level of this Arsenal team.
Oh, for sure. And sorry, I'm having difficulties with my camera right now. It's been a weird little shoot today, I'm not going to lie, but that's you bring up a good point. Eze is quality. Eze is really what Arsenal needed. They had good moments with what they had last season. What does this leave for Arsenal in their midfield, especially with Odegaard and then obviously you have new transfers coming in. How do you think he fits essentially?
I think he fits in on that left wing because, as I mentioned, you've got Gabriel Martinelli on there who really doesn't quite fit anymore. His level has been surpassed by the Premier League. His debut season, his campaign in 21-22 were two of the best left wing campaigns I feel like I've seen, not to be too biased, but it was just an electric player. He was a great find from the third division of Brazil. But since then, injuries have caught up to him. It doesn't quite work out. And Eze is so creative. He's such a good dribbler, which is what this team lacks from that left-hand side. He's going to slide in there and fit perfectly for Arsenal.
Kind of bouncing off what Joa'o was saying, I'm very curious to see what an Eze signing would mean for Martin Odegaard's future. I mean, Rees, do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know. It's complicated because I think that Odegaard's future wouldn't be too harmed by a potential Eze move unless you bring in Rodrigo too, or another left wing signing, which seems out of the picture right now just due to the sheer amount of money that Arsenal has spent. It's north of 150 million, I believe. It might be even higher than that now. But if you were to bring in both a left winger signing and Eze, I would be saying that about the future of Odegaard, because the youth prospects from the Hale End Academy that you have coming through the ranks that will be backups to Odegaard and likely surpassing him in the future. But because it seems like Arsenal will not be targeting another player after bringing in Eze, I think that it really doesn't raise too many questions in my eyes about the future of Odegaard, because again, as he's sliding in on the left. But again, if there's a signing in January or a signing next summer that is a left winger, then that's a whole nother discussion. But for now, I think his future is safe at Arsenal.
And I'm sort of looking ahead a little bit, right? I mean, looking at the trajectory of Odegaard, he's definitely had some great moments with the club, and it's just, how much time do you think he has left, at least at that position? What time frame do you give him, and what do you think has been his best at Arsenal?
That's a tough question to answer, the first part of it at least, because he's a player that is very good on his day, but last season he struggled with injuries. There's rumors that he put off a surgery to the end of the season to make sure that he was available for Arsenal because of the injury crisis that they had. He also had a kid during the season, and just being a new dad, you could tell he's a little worn out from that in the games after the birth of his kid. I don't really know how to pinpoint an ETA on his departure from Arsenal. Obviously, it's inevitable. That's just the matter of the sport. he needs to gain more confidence, because that was really his biggest struggle last season. Alongside the fitness, there was no confidence. And when you're a creative player like that, you're either, whether it's in creating chances for yourself or creating chances for others, you need to be confident. You need to display kind of an ego. You need to be able to take players on, make flashy passes in order to give yourself and your teammates chances at goal. That wasn't quite there. It is there inside of him. It just needs to be unleashed. Again, back to the future of him in an Arsenal shirt. I don't know what that looks like, because it depends on how much you value him truly as captain of the side, because really the last thing you want to do is force the captain out. I do think Arsenal has great captain options if you do get rid of Odegaard. Declan Rice seems perfect, not just to be captain of Arsenal, but also captain of England in the future. But you really cannot get rid of your captain without causing unrest in the dressing room. But
I totally agree, yeah.
Yeah, and Arsenal are looking to make some sales. I hinted at both, or one of them earlier. Leandro Trossard is being targeted by Borussia Dortmund and multiple Premier League sides who are unnamed at this moment. The fee seems to be around 30 million, which if you can get 30 million for Trossard, based off the form you've seen from him the last 12 months, I think that's a steal. Yes, Trossard came in January a couple years ago and delivered almost immediately and was a very good signing for Arsenal that January window. But since then, he just hasn't quite been there. The confidence is still there, but the actual ability hasn't quite been there. They're also looking to sell to West Ham Fabio Vieira, which is such a fascinating sign. He was kind of coined as the Odegaard replacement when he was brought in from Porto. It never quite worked out, mainly because he never got physically gifted enough. When you sign to the Premier League, you have to have a certain level of physicality. It doesn't matter how good you are technically. If you don't meet the bar physically, you're not going to make it in the Premier League. Unfortunately, that's what happened to Fabio Vieira. So we'll have to see what Arsenal do there. There's rumors about Zinchenko as well. Apparently, Mikel Arteta sees him in the fold for next season, which I find quite shocking, given you have Miles Lewis-Skelly at left back. You also have Ricardo Calafiori. I know Calafiori has trouble staying fit, and Lewis-Skelly is 18, and you want to manage the minutes, but Zinchenko being the option there just doesn't make quite sense to me. But we'll pivot now to Liverpool. Last year's champions, they brought in Hugo Ekitike we talked about last week for 60 million. They're going after another striker now, Alexander Isak. Who knows what the transfer fee is? Isak's been pushing for a move, but for Isak to join Liverpool, how much of a coup would that be to some of the other Premier League sides to bring in this, probably the best striker in the league, bar Erling Haaland?
I don't know if they're trying to set themselves up for the future. Maybe they're trying to do the secure your future now with what you have, even though it is still very shaky for Liverpool, and then possibly use Ekitike as something for the future. Same thing as a development plan. It's just they're screwing over a lot of teams here. A lot of teams would need the likes of Isak, Man United included, but it's just it's smart business, and I mean, who knows? Maybe they're cashing in now. Next 2-3 seasons, it's just cheap buys, or even then, try to continue offloading players that maybe don't want to be there anymore.
The way I see it is Liverpool is a club who traditionally doesn't splash a ton of cash in the transfer window. I kind of think this window, they're using it as a setup point for future windows and for future seasons. And they're buying as much talent as they can get right now so that they don't have to buy later, in a way.
I mean, I completely agree with that. If you look at some of the transfer windows that Liverpool's had, there's never been one where they've spent as much money as this one. The only one that's really that close is when they brought in Darwin Núñez for that large sum of fee. But even then, they haven't brought in as many players as they did now. Bringing in Isak, though, you just brought in pretty much the poor man's version of him in Hugo Ekitike, which kind of makes this so shocking to me, because Isak is, again, as I mentioned, probably the second best striker in the Premier League. Why are you going out and buying the junior version of him, the great value version of him, to go out and sign him exactly. It is fascinating to me. I know they've had problems in the attack, especially on that left-hand side, and Isak can, in theory, play there, so can Ekitike, but I just don't understand why you would go out and spend this much money, because it's not like you're spending 80 million combined on both these guys. It's going to be probably 180 at the very minimum for both of these guys, just because of the fee that you're going to have to pay for Alexander Isak. I just don't understand why Liverpool would go out and do both of these.
Yeah, transfer market has Isak at 120 million euros. So that's quite an amount, and I know Newcastle is gonna want to charge on top. It's insane, and I find it mind-boggling that out of all seasons they decide this one is gonna be the one where we're just gonna go ahead and screw everyone over. And even then, they have more holes to fill. 120 million could be dispersed in great ways for that Liverpool squad, but yet they decide to go for another striker. Is it a coincidence? Are they trying to screw over their rivals? It asks a lot of questions, and there's definitely a lot of questions behind Liverpool's moves and the mentality of their front office.
I think we all know that Isak was the final plan for Liverpool. I think we all know that was the end game, the end goal for them. But to me, it's the timing of this. I don't understand Ekiteke's move. I don't understand Liverpool going for Ekiteke. And then I don't understand Isak now asking out of Newcastle once Ekiteke's already at Liverpool. It's just the timing does not make sense whatsoever to me.
I completely agree with that. I mean, going back to last week's pod, I still think that Isak asking out when he is because he wants Saudi. He wants to move to Saudi, which would financially suit him unbelievably well. The issue is I struggle to see a Premier League side paying that fee, because it's going to be so much, and the wage bill is apparently even higher. I've heard rumors that it's north of £300,000 a week, which is quite a lot of money. I know Isak is quite the player, but he has had problems with injuries. You know, he has not had a clean bill of health, which, as good as a player as he is, injuries stack up. Do you really want to pay this much money for a guy that might not be there 38 games a season, like most players, but might not be able to ever give you that over the course of his contract?
Yeah, it's definitely scary. It's definitely scary. In that sense, I'm sort of glad United isn't going from, yes, he's a great striker, yes, he's an elite striker, but it's just, I can already see the movie playing in my head. Oh, United splashes 140 million on him. Things start getting good, maybe first 5-6 games in the season, and then it comes to a crucial point. Oh, Isak's injured. He's out for 3-4 months. The amount of rage and the amount of fury I'd feel in that moment, I don't know if I could go through it. So that's why I'm glad that United isn't in the driver's seat to sign Isak.
I kind of disagree there. I mean, as much as the injury concerns are a thing, you're still signing the second best striker, bar none, in the league, and it's just you would have to sign him if he's interested in coming there.
It's not even that for me. It's just once again, if you know a player is injury prone, if you know that there's problems there, you're really gonna spend that amount of money not knowing if he's gonna be able to stay healthy or not. Plus the wage bill. United notoriously has had problems with the wage bill. Super high wages for players that quite frankly they're important institution, but if they're compared to talents around the league or even talents around the world, they're not even close. And they're making more than players that way. It's just to me, when initially when Martial popped out on the scene and United spent whatever they spent on Martial, and they put the Ballon d'Or clause, and they put all that stuff in his contract, and he was making so much, I was expecting so much. I thought, oh, he could be amazing, and he had great moments. But it's just you were spending so much money on a player who was injured, injured a lot of the time. I don't want the story to repeat itself again. And I'm not saying that Martial, is better than Isak, but he had that potential and he could have gone on to be something amazing. But it's just those injuries, man.
I hate to keep talking about United, but I absolutely agree with you on that front. The injuries and the transfer fee, not so much, but the wage bill. We are currently a club that's trying to desperately to fix our wage bill and stop paying these players so much more than what they're worth. And I agree. Isak totally throws that up. And I agree.
Well, looking at some more of the moves that Liverpool have made this window, they just pretty much paid for the Hugo Ekitike signing by selling Luis Diaz to Bayern for £65.5 million. I was shocked to see that transfer fee go for Luis Diaz. I don't think that's actually the player's value. I think I think that's more so because Liverpool doesn't really have that many options on the left wing anymore. They needed to bring in one, and instead they've sold Luis Diaz for $65.5 million. They do have Cody Gakpo, who has played time there over the course of the last couple seasons there. He's played there in the friendlies. They also have a really, really talented 16-year-old Rio Ingumwa, who has played there over the course of the couple friendlies they've played and scored a great goal against Yokohama F. Marinos. But back to the Luis Diaz sale. Did anyone expect $65 million for Luis Diaz in the big 2025?
No. $65.5 million for 18 goals and assists in 36 matches with Liverpool it's devious. It's I don't know how they keep getting away with this. Honestly, quite honestly, it's shocking. When I saw it, my jaw definitely dropped, and I don't know. I don't know how clubs like Arsenal, how clubs like Liverpool, they can not only make good business in the transfer realm, but also, well, not the offloading part, but definitely there's clubs that are able to offload players for amounts
Chelsea.
that are just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Chelsea too.
Chelsea's the premier example of that, and it's. Just,
I would not include Arsenal in that list because you look at Arsenal's record sales. It's Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain a few years ago. I think Joe Willock's still up there. Nicholas Anelka from 1999's up there. Arsenal is famously a club that cannot sell.
I meant good business by the transfers they've done this season. At least this season. More in recent times, the business they're doing to bring in players. It's just they're one of those clubs that they're doing amazing at it this season.
All right, I've pulled up the record departures list. All right, I want you to guess the top 5 players from Arsenal that they have sold. All right.
Well, Oxlade-Chamberlain's one.
I gave that one
a gimme.
away.
That's one.
That's a gimme.
One was last season. One actually went to United. And then 2 were more than 15 years ago.
One went to United last season.
Not last season, but multiple years ago. One was last season.
Alexis Sanchez. One of them is Alexis Sanchez.
Yeah, he's
Okay.
third for about $30 million.
I'm trying to think of y'all's departures last year.
Last year.
It's one that
ESR?
rips my heart out. Yeah, ESR for 30-ish. And then the
Wow.
other 2, Nicholas Anelka for 30 to Real Madrid, and then that was in 1999, and then Cesc Fabregas in 2011 for 32.
Fabregas.
So I am not having this that Arsenal's a good selling club.
No. I'm saying
That's terrible.
this season. Let me rephrase my words before they're taken out of context, and then I'm on a random clip on TikTok.
Oh, I've clipped this everywhere. It's everywhere.
There's clubs this season that have been great at bringing in players. There's been clubs that have been able to sell players for significant amounts of money that they are, in my opinion, not worth. It's just there's a lot of clubs doing business, and I think this is really good for the Premier League because I think we're gonna see this higher level competitiveness. Sorry, I can't speak English today. I don't know. I think there's gonna be something different. I think there's gonna be a lot more unexpected results than what we see in a regular season.
Well, let's talk about one of those teams that is struggling to make moves, struggling to find anyone. The complete opposite of all the good that Joa'o was just speaking about. Newcastle. We spoke last week about would you rather go to Newcastle or Paris? I think we came to the conclusion we would rather move to Paris. But Newcastle, they are, as we mentioned, they're looking to sell Isak, but what does that mean for them? There's rumors that they're going after Benjamin Sesko and that they will only sell Alexander Isak if they bring in Sesko, which I'm sure is much to the pleasure of the two people in this podcast not named Rees Goodall. But it makes sense for Newcastle's perspective. However, do you really have that much control in the Isak situation?
I don't think so. I think if you're Newcastle and you get that offer over the table, 140, maybe 150 million, you have to sign
it. You say
it.
yes.
You have to
you
accept
say yes.
it. There's
second
no
that
absolute way you can't say no.
I don't think they have leverage at all. I think that Isak's going to say, I'm sitting out, sell me now. I don't want to play in St. James Park, even though it's beautiful. I don't want to stay in Newcastle. Yeah, I hear it's beautiful this time of year. Joa'o, could you vouch?
Well.
Yeah.
You know, it's up to everyone's discretion.
But back to it, it's such a tough scenario because I've heard rumors that Sesko prefers United, and if United could get together the funds, then United's the favorite to sign Sesko. And just where does that leave Newcastle? Because I don't think they're able to hang on to Isak this year.
Well, they're looking at bringing in Dominic Calvert-Lewin on a free transfer, which is probably the funniest rumor I've heard. God bless Dominic Calvert-Lewin. He was once a quite talented striker. That was, 4 years ago now? 5 years ago now? It has been quite the long time since he has been at a high level. He's dealt with injuries. He's dealt with being out of form at Goodison Park. But if Newcastle lose Isak and their replacement for him is Dominic Calvert-Lewin, I'm putting my Premier League predictions Newcastle's bottom half immediately if that's the case.
There's so many more options they could go for. One of them that came up to that popped up in my mind today when we were talking about strikers and throwing them in the mix. Seru Girassi from Dortmund. He was phenomenal last year for Dortmund. 13 goals in the Champions League. I mean, that pretty much proves what he's done, and they've been phenomenal goals. Once again, as you mentioned, like Gyökeres, there's a lot of good things Girassi has done, and I'm surprised that he hasn't been linked to more clubs. I think it wouldn't be a bad signing for Newcastle. I think it'd be definitely better than Calvert-Lewin.
The thing with Girassi though is you compare him to Isak, you compare him to Newcastle's previous target of Hugo Ekitike, you compare him to Sesko, they're all very different players, but Girassi is pretty much a pure poacher. He's not as good on the ball compared to Isak, compared to Ekitike, even compared to Sesko. Girassi is a guy that you have to provide quality service to. He does not make his own chances compared to really the other three targets for Newcastle.
It's just... Okay, so in this case, I want to open up a debate here. Would you rather have Seru Girassi or would you rather have Dominic Calvert-Lewin?
Okay, that's not a discussion. There is no club in the world that is taking Dominic Calvert-Lewin over Girassi at that point.
Exactly, and that's what I mentioned at this point. If you're in such a dire need, I think there's better names. Obviously, you're stuck with the fact that he's a poacher, but even then, that's at the end of the day, they are a club that's supposed to have Saudi money. They're supposed.
But does Girassi want to move to Newcastle?
That's a question.
Does anyone want to move to Newcastle?
So here's a question of this week: would you rather live in Dortmund or would you rather live in Newcastle?
That's a tough one. I've never been to Dortmund, so I cannot vouch. But I'd assume it's nicer than Newcastle, so I'd go to Dortmund.
Is this a new segment of the week?
Yeah, would you rather live in Newcastle or Newcastle?
Oh, I got a good suggestion for next week. Y'all already know it too.
What?
Starts with an S.
Scottsdale.
All right, whatever. We'll talk about it off screen. But back to it. Back to it. Newcastle is basically just going through these bargain bin signings, and I think that's kind of what you have to do because nobody really wants to come to Newcastle unless they're hard pressed to go to Newcastle. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to. Maybe they hit up my least favorite United link in some time in Kolomuani, who's still
Yeah.
hasn't found a club. Maybe that's a potential signing if they don't get Sheshko. But at this point, you're going through the bargain bin. You're going through the clearance aisle. You're going through whatever you can find at this point.
Well, I'll give you someone that does want to be in Newcastle, which is a very small list of people, but there is one. His name's Aaron Ramsdale, former Arsenal goalkeeper, Southampton. Now it's a loan deal. I don't understand this move at all. They have Nick Pope. We talked how he might go to United instead if they can't find Gianluigi Donnarumma there. Aaron Ramsdale, though, being your replacement option for Nick Pope, there's a reason that guy's gotten relegated as much as he has. Yes, his main season with Arsenal, or his 2 seasons as starters with Arsenal, were good, but they weren't great. He fell off towards the end of the second campaign. That's why he was replaced by David Raya. There was once a time where he was distracted by, I think it was a squirrel on the pitch. He's openly said multiple times about how he cannot focus for 90 minutes. I don't understand how this guy keeps showing up in the Premier League, and I certainly don't understand why Newcastle would go out and get him.
I think it's just like how Zach said earlier. You're digging through the bargain bin. You're looking at what possible options there is. It's just Newcastle is in a dire situation right now. At least with the striker and obviously with links of a keeper, and they're bringing in Ramsdale. It's just in a sense, people would say, "Oh, it's to build competition," but what competition would there really be? Realistically, what competition would there really be?
I agree with the bargain bin sentiment. It's that because that is totally what Ramsdale feels like. I don't understand it. There are better buys out there. There's younger guys who have more potential who could be better in the future. They might not be as good as Ramsdale right now, but at least there's somewhere to go with them. When you get Ramsdale, you already know what you have. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about Ramsdale too much. It brings back bad memories. So we'll go to Madrid, the beautiful city of Madrid. I've never been there, but I can only assume. They had a Club World Cup campaign that really is one to forget. They had a bad group game against Al Hilal, and they were, of course, eliminated fairly early into the knockout stage. Quite embarrassingly, well, it wasn't fairly early, was it? It was the semifinal. But for Real Madrid standards, that's fairly early. It was more the matter of fact how they got eliminated 4-0, and they were down 3-0 inside 25 minutes. They looked quite bad defensively throughout the tournament. That game, it was put on blast. Really, the back line, it is quite disastrous, mainly because they have a lot of guys who really don't fit there anymore. I know they didn't play them in that game. They played Rudiger, they played Raul Asensio, but they still have Ferland Mendy there. They still have David Alaba there. They really can't get rid of either of those two, and they also can't bring in anyone new. They got Dean Housen and Trent Alexander, but they were rejected by William Saliba. They were rejected by Martin Zubimendi. They've been rejected by multiple other defensive options, and looking into the next La Liga campaign, already one where Real Madrid didn't win it. Yes, they have Xabi Alonso, new manager, but with the personnel that they have, I'm quite worried for how Real Madrid is going to look defensively next season.
I totally agree, and I mean, you look at their team on paper, and you say, it's if you look at this name, if you look at all these names last season, maybe 2 seasons ago, you say, wow, it's a great squad. It's just they have so much competition in Spain with Barcelona and the project that they have. I think that they've done things great, and really their project hasn't needed that many tweaks per se. It's a young squad. It's a squad, full of passion, full of fire, and it's just Madrid, man. Their options are limited. Their options are limited, especially with people not wanting to go. It's just you gotta sell players to bring in players, and it's just when you can't really do that, and in those situations, it's more it falls on more on Real Madrid really. I think that Florentino Perez has been great with those big moves, with bringing in Mbappe, that you generate revenue, jersey sales, all that stuff, but it's just they're really starting to lack, and you've sort of seen it from last season too, and even then, you have a star player like Rodrigo sitting on the bench when you could generate a good amount of money from him to fund other players, to fund other necessary spots that are lacking on the pitch.
Yeah, and I think it just goes to show that being Madrid's kind of a double-edged sword. Sure, you got the pull. Sure, you got the big name, the brand. Everybody wants to be a fan of Madrid. Everybody wants to come to Madrid. But you can't get rid of players because who's going to want to leave an automatic chance to win a trophy every year while being paid these absurd wages every year? Who's going to want to leave that? It's a double-edged sword in a way.
And that's exactly what Real Madrid is facing right now with Rodrigo, is he doesn't fit Xabi Alonso's timeline. He doesn't fit into the squad that has so much attacking talent. He's a better player than sitting on the bench. He needs to be starting week in and week out. But you mentioned it, the wages he's getting paid, the trophies that he's almost guaranteed to win every single season are something that no player wants to give up on. I mean, footballers, they have a limited amount of time to make this much money, a limited amount of time to go for glory. It's almost like it's not as soulless and just gut-wrenching as going to, like, say, a Saudi and getting paid a lot of money. But it's kind of in that similar boat where how could you ever give that up? How could you ever say no to Real Madrid?
I find it very disappointing the way or the shape that football's really taking. And I feel like before, maybe this happened mid-2010s or even then early 2000s, if there were a player, a high caliber player sitting on the bench, he'd ask for a move out. You'd see a move out. You'd say, "Oh, I want a different bencher. But it's disappointing in my eyes. At least seeing how the game is really changing, and there's less and less players that are really gonna step up and say, "Hey, I don't want this anymore. I'm not a big fan of it personally."
And I truly think it just shows it goes to show a lack of ambition in players nowadays. I mean, traditionally you say lack of ambition when you're talking about players who are at a smaller club, who don't win trophies as much or don't get paid as much, aren't in necessarily a big enough league, but they want to stay loyal to their club. I think maybe Nico Williams, but you can also have lack of ambition being on a club like Madrid and not wanting to start and not wanting to chase glory in other leagues. It's a tough situation in Madrid.
Well, on Nico Williams, he is such a fascinating case. I mean, everyone thought he was destined for an exit from Atletico Bilbao this transfer window before he re-signed with Bilbao. But what Bilbao offers that no other club in the world does is because they're a Basque-only club, they don't buy players. They only sign through their academy. They can give out such great wages, and because of that, you don't want to leave, and you have that hometown connection too.
And it's just, even then, everything with Nico Williams, at least this transfer window, it was so tumultuous. It was said that he was going to go to Barcelona. It was signed everywhere. Oh, Nico Williams to Barcelona, But even then, the reaction from the fans in Bilbao, the way they started, treating Nico's brother Iñaki, the way everything started building up, it's just I find it insane. And it's I don't know if I could say it's a wasted talent, because he's definitely a great player. He's definitely a player with a lot of potential, but it's just I think he's much better than that Bilbao squad.
And I agree with you on that, Merritt, but it's something special when you can only sign academy products, when you can only sign Basque talent. Nico Williams means so much to that club, to that community, to his family. to all the fans there. And I just think that's something so beautiful in sports that we often lose track of, is the community aspect of it. And I think Nico Williams brings a really interesting layer to that. I also think it's interesting how, maybe there could be a heated match between them and Barca when he kind of led Barca on. I'd really look forward to that match this season. I mean, it's not really going to be competitive, I'd say, or I can't imagine it to be competitive, but who knows? You never know.
Yeah, well, let's pivot now to a bit of a rapid-fire review on some of the latest news around the world and global football. Morgan Gibbs-White signed an extension with Nottingham Forest after his move to Spurs fell through. Just what are your guys' quick thoughts on that one, Forest retaining their best player?
It's smart. Last season, they had a definitely better season than previous years. You stay up, you do well. I think it's pretty good. It's just, does Gibbs White really want to be there? Is it forced? Is it there's a lot of questions that pertain to that, and even then, could we see Gibbs White leave in an eventual future? It's just, he was rumored to Spurs and everything, but it's good for Newcastle. Don't know how good it is for Gibbs White.
I think it's a good signing now and for the future for Nottingham, because now you have him signed to a multi-year deal, and even if he wants out, you can request more money in that transfer. So I think overall it's a good player. You keep your best player, and you also increase his value in a potential transfer.
I agree with that. It was a very weird announcement video. Felt almost hostage situation. I was a little bit concerned for Gibbs White's safety. Next transfer, Joao Felix to Al Nassr. Very strange circumstances, him joining Chelsea last season for £45 million, less than a year ago. Al Nassr signs him for roughly £25 million. I think with him, it's really the player where it's what could have been. When he signed for Atletico Madrid from Benfica, there was so much promise. I don't really understand why he would sign for a Diego Simeone system. I stand by that. I thought that then, still think that now. And it just never worked out, did it?
I think he's one of those players that just had a very disappointing career. Had a great upside, never really panned out. Yes, he had his great moments, but it's just his career's falling off a cliff. Don't know how Chelsea, made 20 or how they recovered 20 million off that transfer, but it's just those are really my thoughts. I don't really have a lot to say about it.
I just can't believe the fee. I mean, going back to what Joao was talking about earlier about clubs around the Prem getting ridiculous fees for average to below average players, and I just can't believe $45 million is ridiculous for someone who's essentially a mystery box. At best, that's what you're hoping for, is a mystery box. You're hoping he's something, mate. And instead of the bad player who he's consistently been, you're still hoping on that potential.
I don't think Al Nassr really cares about Joao Felix's potential one bit. I think they care about the shirt sales and whatnot. Another big transfer. This one is quite unfortunate. A player who had a lot of promise when he was in Serie A, Viktor Osimhen, 75 million euros to join Galatasaray. This one, it's just, what on earth is his agent doing? The whole circumstances with Napoli last season where he was destined to leave, Napoli said no, and then they loaned him to Galatasaray. The rumors with Chelsea were there, the rumors with United there, and for him to stay in Turkey is just so unfortunate because he's a player that should be in the Premier League week and scoring week in and week out.
Yeah, and I mean it falls on the agent. Yes, there was interest. It's just it's very confusing. Now for Napoli, I think that this is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, last season they had a good Serie A campaign. They had a okay.
Well, they won it. That's pretty good.
They had a good Serie A campaign, and I think that to be able to fuel that once again and be able to compete with Inter, with Milan, with all the rivals, I think that's amazing.
I think it's good valuation. I mean, we talk about ambition. I wish we would have seen more ambition from his from his side, and from his agent's side. I think I agree with Rees. He should be playing in the Prem. He was on top of my striker list this summer for United. So I think it's overall just great business from Napoli and from Galatasaray. I think it's great both ways. Yeah.
And then the last of this rapid fire transfer review segment just happened before we started recording. Joa'o signs with Chelsea for, I believe it was about 40 million euro or 40 million pounds. I could be wrong there, but it is a good bit of business from Chelsea. We talked about how they kind of just throw money at the wall and hope it sticks, but this summer they've done a good job at actually buying decent players, and this is a guy who was on the list of quite a few Premier League clubs and is probably going to be one of the better center backs in this league come a few years from now.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think that for Chelsea, it's a position where you're trying to replace and you're trying to add some pieces. And I mean, they had Axel Disasi too, who still has a bit of time, but I think once again it's a really good bit of business.
I think it's fine value for a guy who so many other Prem clubs had value in. I don't think he's necessarily a needle mover, especially with Chelsea, who's currently trying to contend. But I think it's a nice sign going forward.
All right, we'll switch gears now to soccer, or before we switch gears, rather, to soccer on this side of the pond. I want to talk about something that happened in Korea last night, or I think it's technically this morning, but the K-League All-Stars played Newcastle United. It's an All-Star game. I don't really care about All-Star games. I'm well documented on that. But Newcastle lost 1-0. It was a 36-minute goal from Jin-Gyu Kim, who plays for the Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors. Isak obviously didn't play. Newcastle fielded quite a good squad and played them for the bulk of the match, only making 5 substitutions in a friendly. But are the warning alarms going to go off in Newcastle after this?
I really think so. There's no other way to put it. I really think so. There has to be something, rushing through the minds of whoever's running Newcastle right now.
Where would you rather live, South Korea or Newcastle?
Seoul looks pretty nice.
Seoul.
From videos I've seen, it looks pretty cool. It's probably a place I'd like to travel to one day. Newcastle, not a place I'd like to travel to one day. So there you go. But yeah, we'll go now to the U.S. talking about some players in some moves here, and the greatest and worst competition of all time, the League's Cup. We'll start though with Vancouver Whitecaps signing Thomas Muller. It is a Whitecaps team who has been very good this year, but they had to send $400,000 in, I think it was general allocation money, to FC Cincinnati, who had the discovery rights on Thomas Muller. Now, discovery rights are kind of a complicated thing. It's kind of just a first dibs list in MLS. The word discovery isn't kind of the right way to describe it. But for a player who started playing in 2008 as a professional and a club that didn't start in MLS until 2019, I think it was, this is a little ridiculous. But for Muller, Vancouver, that's a good signing for Vancouver's purposes.
Definitely, and I mean, Vancouver was a team last year that went into the playoffs looking pretty hot. They had those good results initially. I hate the best of 3 legs, but going off a little bit on the discovery rights. So basically, you mentioned it pretty well. It's how teams can go ahead and basically reserve the rights to the player, but they also get first dibs. So, for example, if teams like LAFC or Galaxy or NYCFC, big squads in the MLS wanted Thomas Muller, well, he had to go through Vancouver first. If he didn't want Vancouver at all, that's whenever the negotiations can start with these other clubs. But I think it's really good for Vancouver, who haven't had a big name in quite a minute.
Yeah, without lethal their attack has been going forward this year. I like the signing. I don't quite get the need for discovery rights in MLS, but there's not much you could do about it, and I think it was a good signing for Whitecaps.
Yeah, Whitecaps currently second in MLS on 45 points, fifth in the Supporter Shield race. They do have a match in hand against quite a lot of the teams above them. They are not participating in the League's Cup, so they have quite the break. They play in MLS August 9th before a quite the big match in the Canadian Championship, the Canadian version of the FA Cup. They're the only MLS team left, and they've got Forge FC, which are the best team in the Canadian Premier League year after year. But it's time we stop avoiding the elephant in the room and start talking about the League's Cup. The League's Cup on a reduced format compared to the last couple of seasons, but not as reduced as it has been years before. 18 Liga MX sides, all 18, versus the 18 MLS teams. Each side plays 3 teams from the opposite league. So, for example, if you're Tigres, they faced off last night versus Houston. Their next 2 games are San Diego FC and LAFC. You don't play a team from your same league until likely the quarterfinals, I believe it is. It's all against teams from the other league. It's quite the ridiculous format. There is no draws. It's straight to a penalty shootout. It's just unbelievably stupid in my opinion.
And I mean, before we start bashing it, or before we start talking about it, I sort of previewed what I was going to say. Let's just go through these results real quick. I'll give them in rapid fire form. First match of the night yesterday was Montreal-León. That was a 1-1 draw. But obviously there's no draws in this competition. Montreal took it 7-6 in penalties, and also Toluca Columbus Crew. That was a 2-2 match. 4-2 in penalties. What's up?
Before you continue, I gotta say, someone I know that is very close to you and I would be very proud of you for calling that a draw and not that whoever won the penalty shootout is the winner. And that is a good friend of the pod, Owen Evans. He is quite the stickler of the IFAB rules, and there is no such thing as a winner. It's the match is drawn, and then you win the penalty shootout. So I appreciate that.
Of course. And then right after, we have New York City FC losing to the mighty Puebla 3-0. Right after that, Tigres battered Houston Dynamo 4-1.
Diego Lainez masterclass.
He had a spectacular goal, left-footed shot, top left corner.
Mm-hmm.
And then right after, Los Angeles FC falls to Mazatlan, or they drew 1-1, but then they lost in the penalty shootout 10-11. Don't ask.
Was that
me
stressful, Joa'o?
I'd not like to talk about it. Right after, to wrap up the night, Pachuca beat San Diego FC 3-2. Great game. And then Dreyer with the 92nd minute red card. Rees, you watched that match. What were your general opinions on the matchup?
It was a chaotic match. San Diego was all over Pachuca. They really probably should have won this game by multiple goals. Pachuca went into halftime up 2-0, which realistically it should have been the other way around. But it was a very heated matchup. It was very fun. And honestly, if MLS is going to promote Leagues Cup and have it be taken seriously by anybody, that is the match that you'd want the neutral to see. It was on national TV, so it was quite the entertaining game. But I'm going to go back to the LAFC Mazatlan game. David Ochoa is LAFC's backup goalkeeper?
I realized that yesterday, and I was very disappointed. Now, what made me a little bit more annoyed about this penalty shootout was the fact that Mazatlan had like 4 players, maybe 5, shoot to the right, and each and every single time David Ochoa went to the left. It's just, they're shooting to the right after 2 to 3 shots. Just have one, and even then he almost saved one. It's just there was a lot of class on that Mazatlan squad. I mean, players who used to be really big in the league with Club America, like Nicolas Benedetti, sorry, and a lot of up and coming talent. So I mean, it's just made me want to pull my hair out, really.
I just cannot believe Ochoa now is with LAFC and mainly playing for LAFC too. What a fall from grace that was, because when he was with RSL, that first season, he looked like one of the top keepers, young keepers in the world, not just in MLS but in the world. Makes the one-time switch to Mexico, and I think he played 9 times for DC United. Went to Atletico San Luis. I don't know if he even got a game there. It was just quite disastrous. I think he played for Ventura County Fusion a couple summers ago. That just shows the fall from grace. So it's weird to see him there. But I think it's time we talk about it. How just bad, dumb, stupid this competition is.
My problem, and I mentioned it before, I will mention it once again. Liga MX used to be so much bigger than all of this Leagues Cup nonsense. Well, first of all, speaking of the Leagues Cup, it's the biggest cash grab I think that CONCACAF has tried to pull on a club level in a very long time. It's just, even seeing it yesterday, you're going to make money off of a Tigres Houston Dynamo, given the demographic, given the fans, given the area, given all of the factors. You're going to make money. That's smart from CONCACAF. Sure, you want to make more money. Now, my problem is CONMEBOL pulled all the resources to have a Copa America in the United States, using MLS clubs, stadiums and using all of that. If these leagues truly wanted to market themselves as top Premier Leagues who are going to be playing, top competition, that's when they try to leverage their resources and possibly go in somewhere with CONMEBOL and saying, hey, we want, I don't care if it's 2 or 3 clubs playing in the Libertadores, playing in the Sudamericana, playing against clubs like River, like Boca, like La U Católica. Like there's so many squads in there, and there's so much competition in South America that CONCACAF has not taken notice, and that's the reason why these leagues are the way they are. They're so complacent, and it's honestly very disappointing from a fan's perspective. Because hearing the stories growing up about Chivas Boca, about Chivas Internacional when they had that one run in 07, because I hear about it all the time from fans. It's just, it sounds like something so amazing, and it's just something they don't take advantage of.
In fairness, to a point you made earlier in your speech there, the Leagues Cup is not ran by CONCACAF. It is a joint venture between MLS and Liga MX.
It doesn't matter, because there are at least for Liga MX, there are high-ranking officials who do advise who advise for CONCACAF, and I mean CONCACAF more as North American football in itself. Maybe I shouldn't say it that way or market it that way, and that is my fault for being inaccurate there. But it's just,
you should be ashamed.
It's very disappointing, and I will sit on that hill and I will die on that hill, just because people want to say, oh, MLS is better than X European league, or or Liga MX this, Liga MX that, when I think it's far from reality.
So, wow,
you go ahead, Zach.
I was just wondering this entire time, do you have an idealized, replacement for the competition? You obviously talked about how much you don't like the competition, but what would you do to truly show both leagues' worth to the rest of the world?
Well, first of all, I'd try to add spots for these competitions, sort of how they do it in England. First slots, how they do Champions League, Europa League, Conference League. I try to introduce that. But there's a lot of factors that are wrong with MLS. Like I think it's every time a team wins a championship, I don't remember what resources, but they are reduced. So they are penalized for winning the championship. And that's to ensure fair competition and blah 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 and whatever. And that's why Galaxy is doing so bad this year. there's so many things that have to change. There's so many more things that they have to do to ensure competition. Because the top of the top and MLS, they're trying to fight for a cup. They're trying to win, but obviously, you know, like in other sports, the ones that are at the bottom, they're just there. They're thriving. They don't care if they win or not, and it's just there's things that have to change within MLS, but then there also has to be cooperation with CONMEBOL and saying, oh yeah, we'll allow you to have 2 spots for the Libertadores for MLS, and then we'll give you 2 for Liga MX. Yes, it would have to expand the competition, but even then, I think that there's a significant amount of fan bases, at least for the bigger Libertadores or Sudamericana clubs that can attract. And even then, fans travel too. I don't think it'd be bad for anybody really.
I'm going to poke a couple holes in this because I don't think that MLS sides and Liga MX sides joining the Libertadores is the best idea, because travel is one thing. You know, we've already seen how just the travel for these MLS teams going to Mexico, going to the Caribbean in the early part of the season just ends their season for that part. You know, the first couple months, if you're going to go on a Champions Cup run, you have to give up the first couple months of your MLS campaign. You now factor in flights to Brazil, flights to Peru, flights to Ecuador, Argentina, Chile, so on and so forth. It's just something it makes sense in terms of, you know, a footballing standpoint, but once you actually kind of look at the economical and other sides of it, it doesn't make that much sense. Back to Leagues Cup, though, my problem with this competition isn't, you know, it's not a structure thing. I don't care about, you know, MLS and Liga MX sides playing each other. My problem is that it exists. There is no room for this in the U.S. soccer calendar. You know, we've seen over recent years that MLS teams are pulling out of the U.S. Open Cup, which is quite frankly the biggest disgrace ever. There is no need for that. There is no room for that. And putting it on this made-up competition that doesn't mean anything. It is just it's not a friendly, but it's a step above a friendly. It's pointless. You know, the Open Cup is been here before MLS. It is I think 120 years old, 110 years old. It is old. It's been here forever. This is American soccer history, and sending your second team or not sending a team at all in the case of DC United over the last couple of years is just the biggest disgrace of all. I mean, can you imagine, you know, Manchester United, you know, they qualified for Europe, which, well done, good job for you guys if that happened in this scenario. But they then go on and say, hey, we're not going to play in the FA Cup. You know, our schedule's looking a little too busy. We've got a little too many games in December. You know, let's just pull out of the FA Cup so we can have an extra long break in January. No, there would be protests. That is a disgrace. The U.S. soccer needs to recognize the prestige of the U.S. Open Cup and putting it on Wednesdays, putting the games on, you know, hard to watch platforms, like whether it's all on YouTube or, you know, games only on Paramount, whatever, that is not going to grow the U.S. Open Cup. You know, again, back to England, I know soccer's the main sport there, but games are on easy to watch channels like the BBC's airing games, ITV is airing games. You do not have to look too hard to find games. And guess what? They're always on Saturdays. The US Open Cup, if they play a game on a Saturday, it's because there was a lightning delay on a Wednesday, and the only day that was free for both those teams was that Saturday. And I don't even know if that's happened in the last 10 years. It is just the biggest disgrace in the world that this competition exists and pulls teams out of the US Open Cup.
But look at the differences in passion for the sport. Look at how much England cherishes and values the game and even its fans. In the United States, it's more on an investment standpoint. Even then, you see it in the academies. You see it with club owners trying to make money wherever they can, and even then, teams having to pay the MLS a certain amount of money to have a franchise. It's just, here it's an investment. Over there in England, in my opinion, it's a lifestyle. And that's a problem with even then Liga MX too. Before, it used to be a lifestyle. Before, it used to be something that people used to live, and now it's an investment.
But
that's thanks to whoever's managing and running the league.
to be fair, that's U.S. sports in general. I don't think you're ever really going to separate the MLS from that. And I think it's an unfortunate downside to the league. I think the league is always going to be money hungry. I think it's always going to be ran by the billionaires. You know, I don't know how you really fix that in this
And
country.
it's just how, in that case, then how do you grow the sport? Unless if USL does something miraculous, or not even miraculous, but let's say USL does do something, and they overtake the MLS as a top league in the United States. It's just there's so much that has to be done academy wise. There's so much that has to be done within the players. There's a lot of things that are lacking, and that's why I like the structure of San Diego FC's academy. I know I'm veering off a little bit, but they're bringing in players from all around the world, and at this point they're not from what I've read they're not charging, and they're taking the best of the best, and they're trying to make something out of it. If the MLS doesn't veer more, or if owners don't veer more towards that mentality, it's going to take much more longer. It's going to be much more difficult to bring a change, at least with the MLS at the helm of the footy world.
Well, this is a rant that could go on all day. We don't have all day, so we're going to put an end to it now. I know I have my disgruntles. I'm quite disgruntled with the state of soccer in this country, but again, another time, another day. Well, you know what, Joa'o? Well, me and you will have it just an hour one day. Just me and you, and we'll sit down and record it. It'll get millions of views, I'm sure of it. But as we wrap up, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Give a 5-star review depending on where you're listening to. Zach, where can they find you on Twitter?
Zach_Dworaczyk on Twitter.
Joa'o, where can they find you?
Reports on Twitter.
Follow me at Rees11_. Yeah, thank you for tuning in. It's a beautiful game, but it's way more beautiful when England wins the Euros.